This is the chapter on color and light. If it weren't for color, I wouldn't be in art, because color is the most fascinating part of art. To me, it just gives me moods and makes me feel happy. It makes me feel delighted because it's so charming. You kind of appreciate your sight where you're allowed to look at color. But color is light, and I'm talking not in the sense where we see it on a painted, or we see it on a cup, or we see it on a car. That's when we take a pigment or we imitate what is real color. Real color, in the physics sense, is light. It comes in as a white light, so to speak, but it is filtered by a prism. And when you see anything that blocks the sunlight, it creates a color, what we know as a basic color. So when it shines through a prism, light waves break up into differing wavelengths, so that color is really light of differing wavelengths. That's very important for us to remember. Color is light. And what we see painted on walls and all the places we see such extraordinary color, that's because we're imitating through pigment that light. But it comes through a prism, and it creates some of the most fascinating colors to us, and we often see a rainbow. The clouds are blocking the sunlight and therefore creating a rainbow. So light affects color, and you can see where you can shine a lamp on a certain wall, and that wall will light up, and the wall will be a different color than where the lamp or light is not showing brighter light or dimmer light. So light affects the color we see in a room or in a landscape, and I'm going to show you that very simply in a moment. But first, let's understand. If you look at your textbook, you'll see in figure 623 this diagram that shows how white light comes through a prism. And once it comes through that prism, it breaks up into what we call wavelengths. Those wavelengths are what we call colors, or what we call pigment, or what we call the basic color scheme: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. Now, when we see color in a painting, and this was created on a computer, this is fascinating. Looks like ribbons, it's fantastic. But it's a non-objective painting with lots of color. But it is, in this case, they've taken pixels, and on a computer, you have more than 2 million different pixels of color to choose from. But what I want us to focus on during this period of study and this fascinating unit that we're in, this chapter, the conventional color wheel. I want you almost to memorize it. And I'm going to show you how you can memorize it, because in a quiz I may ask you, if we were to mix yellow with blue, what color would we get? And as you see here, yellow mixed with blue is going to end up green. And if we were to look at this in a triangle, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, these are triangles coming from what we will call the basic color scheme, the primary colors. Then we mix the primary colors. When we mix yellow and red, we get orange. We call them secondary colors. And later on, we will mix a primary with a secondary, and we will get, usually it's 2 colors with a dash in between: yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-violet. We call these tertiary colors. Now, we're going to study how and what happens when you mix colors, when you deny light and you mix and bring those colors together. Red and blue, obviously going to be violet, and then red and yellow, obviously, are going to be orange. And then when you mix red and green, you're going to get sort of like a neutral color. And when we add these colors together, we see where they change. So this fascinating color wheel, I just love this because it gives you an idea of how many different colors there are, how they change as they move from one light condition to another. This basic color wheel is what I want you to get in your mind so that you almost can memorize it, that you can draw it on the back of a piece of paper and almost outline all the colors in the color wheel, because there's a governance system here, particularly for mixing paint, that you should understand. Colors everywhere. Colored pencils. We have colored brushes. We have all kinds of colored stones, backgrounds that are fascinating, almost like we're underwater. We have color that makes us warm. This orange tree, I almost feel like we're in the middle of the fall in this fascinating painting. So we start out with the three, what we call primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. Notice how they're in a triangle. So primary colors are those three: red, yellow, and blue. Then we go to secondary colors, which are mixed from the primary colors, and that's going to be green, orange, and violet. Then we go to the tertiary colors, as I told you, and they are usually two names. We have yellow-green, for an example, or blue-green. Both, if you notice, blue being primary, green being the secondary. And the tertiary color is a primary next to an adjacent secondary. Adjacent where? On the color wheel. So red-orange would be adjacent to the red and the yellow. Then we have complementary colors. Now, decorators use complementary colors where they will have a yellow with a violet, or they'll have a blue-green with an orange, or they will have different variations. We're going to see values. Sometimes we'll say, well, red and green do not work. But that's not always true. There's certain values and shades of yellow and green that do not work, but there are green and shades of red that do. We're going to find out later on that pink is a value of red, and that light green is a value of green. And so what we do there, I know of a sorority, the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, aka my daughter belongs to that sorority, and their colors are pink and green. Then we have what are called analogous colors. Analogous colors are red, orange, and yellow, or orange, yellow, orange, and yellow. In other words, they're in multiples of threes, but they're related to each other on the color wheel. You can create a room with blue, blue-green, and green. Analogous color scheme, and it works. You can create a cooler room with a violet, blue-violet, and blue. Three analogous colors. So let's review them again. Primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. Notice how they're in a triangle. Then we have secondary colors, and they are mixed from the primary colors. So we mix yellow and red, we're going to get orange. If we mix yellow and blue, we're going to get green. And if we mix red and yellow, we're going to get violet. Now, color is fascinating. This is a painting by what we call one of the super realist artists. It looks like a photograph, but it really is a painting. And this is a group of artists that we'll learn about later on. We call them super realists, and their idea, or they strive to make it more real than a photograph. So what is meant by pigment again? Pigment refers to the paint color which ultimately appears in a tube or a bottle, an applicator, or a jar, imitating light of differing wavelengths, imitating the physics light of different wavelengths. And pigment is an imitation of light, and we do it in oil paint, pastel. You can buy a tube of acrylics, tubes of watercolor. You can have tubes of oil paint, and then of course you can have pastels. And last but not least, you get watercolor and gouache. Gouache is sort of like a watercolor used to be used by commercial artists. So now we come to another word, and that word is called hue. And you've known this since you were in kindergarten. These basic hues, what are they? A hue is the name of a color. So we know them since, and there's 6 basic hues. 1, red, yellow, orange, blue, green, and violet. Those are the 6 hues, and from them we can come up with a multiplicity of colors when we add either white or black, and we can multiply those numbers of colors. And I'll show you how the artist works. So we come up with all kinds of fascinating, looks like smoke, looks like clouds, looks like a blanket. It's swirling, it's moving our eyes around. You are moving and shifting. You're not standing still, just as we look at this fascinating color. Look at this artist who paints sort of a landscape, but it's an abstraction. Notice there's no limit. Who says you can't have a red sky? Who says you can't have roads that are bright blue? But the artist has that power and that freedom. Here's a good case where color affects or light affects color. Now look at those beautiful bright flowers on the left. And yet when the sun goes down, that color to our eye will change. And then on the right side, if I were to ask you, how many greens do you see? I think you'd be fascinated. I mean, there are over 100 different greens you're looking at. And they change because of the way the light hits them. And then color creates mood. Wow, the mood. I was up in Maine with our family and Mrs. Birch and my wife, and there was a lake out there, and it looked just like this, pristine. And the only way you were going to break that lake up was to throw a stone, and you would see it break up. But it was almost as if you could walk across this glass, pristine lake. And when the sun rose, it created a mood, unlike many people like sunrises and sunsets. And in this case, you can even see ice in the foreground. What a fascinating mood that this picture creates. Look at this sundown, how we can see the sun going down over the hills and be fascinated by it. Even in the urban community, we can see the reflections on water, which give light and the color of water a different look. You can almost feel, because of the color, the greens, you can almost feel the wind, softness of the beach in this particular painting. And we're going to learn shortly that the lighter, as things go further away, they get lighter and higher. So you create depth. There's a little boat out here, but that's created because it's lighter and it's higher on the picture plane than these objects down here. So, but when we look at a collage on paper cloth by the famous African-American artist, Romare Bearden, He was fantastic. He passed away not too long ago, but he did collages. He would go down to the Bahamas every winter, and when he came back, he was ready for an exhibit, and he would have a multiplicity of artworks. And he would take, instead of painting what he would cut out the arm shape and paste it into his work and created these abstract works that you see. Look at figure 630 in your textbook. And then look at the power of flowing, moving color. It's many moods. Look at the center there where you almost feel like a Monet, or on the left where you have a sunrise, or on the right where you have varying lines and gradations of orange. What a fascinating move. How can you not feel warmed by these colors? Then we have more colors. Now we're getting into more detail, but we will learn later on that a painting or a good composition has to have a balance and repetition. These are principles of art we're going to study in the next chapter. And you will see that if you have red on one side, you're going to have to balance it somewhere, red, because a good composition has repetition, but it also has unity. In other words, there are reds all about this. There are yellows all about this particular work. And then we're going to learn a subject we call value. Value refers to the shade of a color. How much white or black is in what we call the hue. So we have the 6 hues: red, yellow, orange, violet, and blue, and green. But now, when you add black to red, notice how at the top here you get values of red, which we call brown. If you add white to red, as you move this way, you get values of pink. So pink is a value or a shade of red. Brown is a value or shade of red. Now, that's important because when you look at a color, you're looking at differing. Here's one building, the same color, it's marble, but as light affects it, you see differing colors. This is a different value than this. So as light affects it, we get different values. So the question is, how much white or black is in the hue to create color? So let's go back a minute. If I were to say to you, you can only purchase or only going to give you money for 5 tubes of paint, which tubes would you buy? And the answer to that, quite frankly, is 1, red, yellow, and blue, which are the primary colors, from which you can mix the secondary colors. And then you would add a tube of black and white. And from there, most artists use white more than anything. They mix it to get different colors other than what we call the pure hue. So primary colors, there's our triangle again: red, yellow, and blue. These are the basics. Then we have secondary colors. What are they? Green, violet, and orange. And look how the triangle goes, but it's still a triangle. And then we have the tertiary colors. Look at this. Tertiary colors are composed of 2 hues consisting of a primary and a secondary color, which is located adjacent to each other on the color wheel. So we have tertiary colors, 2 names: blue-green, red-orange, yellow-green, blue-violet, red-violet, and these are our tertiary colors, usually in pairs. All right, so we move forward and we come to complementary colors. And remember, I said the complementary colors are colors, 2 colors that are opposite on the color wheel. So if you know your color wheel And I would recommend that you diagram it, that you create your triangle. One triangle is going to be your primary, and then you will turn it over upside down and create another triangle. It almost looks like a Star of David. But as you move around, the second points are your secondary colors. And then in between there are your tertiary colors. Now your complementary colors. So this blue, green, and this orange here are complementary. This yellow and this violet are complementary. Now these terms are very important. Blue and orange, red and green, and violet and yellow. I love to talk about this color wheel. Now look as you move closer into the white circle, the smaller circle in the middle. Notice how the colors, we seem to be adding a drop of a darker color, making the red out on the outside much brighter than the red on the inside. Now these are values, and this is how an artist works to get the value or the intensity that he or she wants. In this case, we have what we call pure color, or the pure pigments that are here, but we sometimes want to tone them down. It's too bright. If I had a suit this color and walked into class, you would all fall out laughing. So if I had a suit this color even, or if I came in looking like this dog here. I love dogs. Any commercial on television, I just love dogs. But if I told you I was going to give you a dog and he looked like this, I'm sure you would be quite taken aback with all these colors. But there's a way, students, to tone down these bright colors when you're painting. And it's called, where we cut it down, is we use a drop of the complementary color. So if this red that you see here was here, and we want to tone that down, we wouldn't add black. Then you're going to get brown. No, you're going to add a drop of green, and that's going to tone it down so that you have differing values. So again, analogous colors are colors that are close on the color wheel. Complementary colors are colors that are opposite on the color wheel. Triadic colors, you have three, and they range on the color wheel equally distant from each other. We have monochromatic, where we have different shades of the same hue. So I can take and add white to blue, and I can add black to blue, but it's still blue. And so we call it a mono one, monochrome. Chrome is another term for color. And then we have what is called a split complement. Some decorators use that. So again, analogous colors are 3 to 4 colors which are located to each other on the color wheel: red, orange, and yellow, blue, green, and violet, and green and blue, green, green. You do it in 4s or 3s. Analogous colors. So here's a summary of the whole thing: tertiary colors, primary colors, secondary colors, complementary colors, but you see them all labeled here. And in our textbook, in figure 644, Kandinsky was one of the early, look, he painted this in 1913, but he was one of the first, what we call abstract expressionists, non-objective artists, who just experiment with shapes and colors and lines. And yet he is saying something exciting to us here, not because he gave it some figurative look or put a person or a scene in, but he's doing it strictly with lines and colors and shapes. Now this is a car. Most cars are monochromatic. We used to have different colors. You can have a dark blue top and another blue for the bottom. But most cars today are what we call monochromatic. The same chroma, same color is there. And when we talk about monochromatic color, we are referring to one hue in many values, as I told you. Light blue, dark blue, dense, intense blue, but it's still blue, so therefore it's monochromatic. Now we come to what I just explained to you about intensity. Intensity, see, value refers to the shade of a color. How much black or white, that's the left side here, how much black or white is mixed into this color in order to make another color. So in this case, we mix some black with red, we're going to get brown. When we mix some white with red, we're going to get pink. But when we talk about intensity in color, we're talking about the brightness or dullness of a color, the amount of saturation, and how fascinating that is. We can tone that red down here by putting a drop of the complement, which is green, and you will see a toned down, different shade of red as you see it over here. And so over and over again, you see the shade, the hue, and then we have something where we just add a little drop to white. We call it a tint. And this is what we use in many bedrooms. We use a tint of pink. Sometimes it's white, but it has a drop of a hue in it, and therefore it gives a tinge. Here are your values again. Remember I told you, most people don't like red and green. But when you put pink and this light green together, as the AKA's colors are, you will see that they work. So value refers to the shade of a hue. How much white or black is mixed with that hue. Now here, we don't have too much. It's just fascinating. Looks like cloth. The cloth is going in different directions. It's just full of color. If you're on a cloudy day and you come outside and you look at this painting, you're going to be uplifted with color. When you look at this one, it has a multiplicity of colors, but notice that's what you have to do. You have to balance them. They have to be unified. You can't just put some on one side and others on another. It has to be balanced in what we call unity. When we get to the principles of art, you will see just what I'm talking about. Last but not least, what is meant by a motif and what is meant by a pattern? Well, a motif is a single design. See this in the stairway here. That's a single design. But when we repeat it over and over again, as we do up here, it is called a pattern. A pattern is a repetition, an alternation of the same motif. So when you take that motif, look like these desks here, you repeat it over and over again, you create what is called a pattern. So this is very important when you're communicating in art. In art is communication. It's one of our definitions. We said that art is expression. That's the first one. Then art is communication. We have to have a sender or an encoder, or in this case, an artist, from which the art or the color is generated, the idea, the drawing, where is it coming from? Someone's spirit, someone's mind. And then we have the receiver, and in this case, we are the viewers in this particular era. The individuals who may see the work and interact with the work. Sometimes we don't always understand the work, but it's part of the communication process. Then in every painting or composition or poem or novel, you have to have a message. That which is expressed, a theme, emotionally, politically, and artistically. You have to be saying something to someone. And then you have to have a medium or material or tool to use to express yourself. So you're going to need paint, or you're going to need stone, or you're going to need television, or print media, your magazine. That's what we call your medium, or in a plural sense, it is media. And last but not least, as we have in this course, I want responses. I'm not going to test you in the traditional way, but I do expect you to give me expressive feedback about how you feel about certain works of art. And in that response and reaction, we call that, as I said earlier, art criticism. Art criticism is anything that is written or said about a work of art. So let's review that again, that communication process, because that's what's taking place when you're painting or you have a composition or a jazz concert. You have to have a sender or an encoder or an artist. Then you have receivers, people who are viewers or listeners. And then you have to have a message. What are you going to communicate? And then a medium. What kinds of materials will you use? A song, a letter, painting, sculpture, your voice, body language. There are all kinds of ways to communicate, but in that case, the medium becomes the human body, if it's body language. And then you have your feedback or art criticism. I'm going to make a copy of this for you so that you can put it in your notebook. So Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, look at the power that he has and expresses in the sky. It's a town, but the emphasis in this picture, the dominance in this picture is that moving sky. Most of us, if we did see a sky like that, we would be running or hiding. But it's fascinating, and this is one. It's called Starry Night, and it's in our textbook. Then you have dominance. That's we will study that as one of the principles of art. But look how red and yellow dominate these paintings by Paul Gauguin. And of course, even in nature, we see a multiplicity of fascinating colors. So to finish up, what is meant by when we have neutral colors? Neutral colors are colors that can be integrated into any color scheme. Your beiges, your bone colors, which is like a brown, eggshells, which is like a yellowish white. We have whites, we have blacks, we have grays, and we have tints. These are all neutrals. Now, when you use browns and green plants in a decorating setting, you often will get they will be seen as neutrals. So when we studied line, we talked about it a little bit, but it's very important we understand this in painting. It's called aerial perspective. And in our questions, we asked you, how did you describe aerial perspective? And it's concerned about creating depth or distance or atmosphere on the picture plane. In other words, how do you make it look like it's way off, and yet you have a length and a width in a two-dimensional form? And as we have some rules in creating depth. One is, as things go further away, they become three things. Smaller, they become lighter, and they become higher on the picture plane. I'm going to demonstrate that in just one moment, but that's aerial perspective, how we get depth in art. So when we look at space, space takes up the place, whatever that form is that's taking up the space between the length and the width. So in this case, that looks like a cup, but really, if you look at the cup and the side of the cup, you're looking at two faces. The element of space refers to distances, distant areas around, between, and within components of a work of art. This is in our textbook. Space can be positive, meaning the white part that surrounds the Sherlock Holmes look, that would be considered the positive, and the black would be considered the negative. these two-dimensional forms. And then sometimes space, we have something we call light sculpture, where atmosphere and there's an illusion of space. So when we look at space, it isn't always clear, but we see space as an element of art. I mean, an architect, if he didn't have space to work with, he's given certain dimensions. He can't go beyond that. If you say I have to employ 5,000 people and have offices for them, and I only have a 200 by 200 lot, it means I must go up. So space is an element used by many artists, particularly the architect. And then you see how space around objects. Look at that tree as we look through the rock and how it almost frames it. Positive space, shapes or forms of interest that usually you can describe. Negative space, that empty space between the shapes or forms. And we find out in printing, if you don't have what we call white space, in other words, around it, you have too much written, people won't read it. So the illusion of space is very important. You create an image, you create an atmosphere, and space is very, very important. So now we define space in art. What is space? It can be defined as over, under, through, behind, around a form. Architecture, sculpture, weaving, ceramics, and jewelry are three-dimensional art forms. Two-dimensional, we have length and width.